written in the Book of Genesis chapter 8:4, and in the Book of Jubilees chapter 5, are the writings of an ancient mountain range where the ark of God that was built by one man and his family went to rest. In a time when the world was filled with evil and great despair, one man was chosen to save humanity through his family. This is documented and recorded in the Old Testament writings of Moses, God's prophet of the ancient world and the author of the 5 books of Torah. This same Moses is also the appointed author of the Book of Jubilees, tells the story of the history from creation to the Exodus. According to its ancient text, it is said to have been written on Mount Sinai. Being one of the holy books of the Ethiopian Bible, formerly known as the Orthodox Tewahedo Biblical Canon, that some argue is the ancient Book of Oa'uXva'a, written in Joshua chapter 10 verse 13 and 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 18. On this journey, we are going to unravel the secrets of this ancient mountain range that inherited an ancient name that seems to have no place of origin. But is this ancient name linked to the land of creation and the lost Garden of Eden? Because in order to find out exactly where the ark rested, we need to search the Bible and unravel the writings that tell the story of the Great Flood, its hidden secrets, and the origins and meaning of the given ancient name, Ararat. By discovering the true meaning of this ancient name, we can then link it to the true biblical location of the mountain range where the Ark of God went to rest. Because, according to the Bible, these ancient mountains were the first part of earth to see the light of day, when the fountains of the earth burst forth and the waters from above rained down and flooded the whole earth. We will venture down a pathway going back in time over 6,000 years that will allow us to trace the history, traditions and cultures of our ancestors, our forefathers, beginning with the creation of Adam and Eve to the time of the Great Flood. But in order to do that, we must begin our story by finding a man chosen by God from birth 600 years before the flood. This is recorded in the first book of Enoch. A man chosen by God to build an ark that would carry him and his family upon the waters that covered the earth. And because of the mercy of our Creator, choosing this one man, humanity lived on to this very day. Let us take this journey together in finding Noah, the ocean warrior from the days of old. Finding Noah, Part 1. Tracing the origins of the name Ararat. To find Noah, we have to first find the Ararat Mountains, because that is where the ark went to rest, and more significantly, that is where Noah lived. That is where Noah died, and that is where the Ethiopian Bible of Jubilees say, Noah was buried. To be able to find the Ararat Mountains of the Bible, we must closely study and analyze the writings of Moses that gives to the reader an explicit description of where the mountains of Ararat are located. And although Moses' description is very clear on where the Ararat Mountains are located, many Bible scholars still place the Ararat Mountains of the Bible so far away and out of touch with reality from its true biblical location. So, what did the name Ararat mean in the days of Noah? Because according to the Ethiopian Bible of the Book of Jubilees, the language of creation is no other than the tongue of the Hebrew. This is recorded as being the time when God commanded the angel of presence to teach Abraham how to read and write in Hebrew. Abraham was over 70 years old at this time, Book of Jubilees chapter 12 verses 25 to 28. And Yahuwah Almighty said, Open his mouth and his ears, that he may hear and speak with his mouth, with the language which has been revealed. For it had ceased from the mouths of all the children of men from the day of the overthrow of Babel. And I opened his mouth, and his ears and his lips, and I began to speak with him in Hebrew, in the tongue of the creation. End of verse. So just for clarity, not only did this Bible verse establish that the Hebrew language is the tongue of creation, but we must take note that the Hebrew language was ceased from the mouths of all the children of men from God's judgment at the Tower of Babel. Allow me to emphasize on where the verse states, all the children of men from the day of the overthrow of Babel. Notice how the verse is focused only on the people of the Tower of Babel. Later in this journey, I will cover this very important Bible verse that plays a great part in finding the origins of the word Ararat. Let us read on the next couple of verses, shall we? And he took the books of his fathers, and these were written in Hebrew, and he transcribed them, and he began from henceforth to study them. And I made known to him that which he could not understand, and he studied them during the 6 rainy months. And it came to pass, in the 7th year of the 6th week, that he spoke to his father and informed him that he would leave Haran to go into the land of Canaan, to see it and return to him. Now, let me ask another simple question of what does the word or name Ararat mean in the Hebrew language of today? Well, apart from what the Bible tells us, the name Ararat is often associated with the area of Armenia and the mountains within it. The term is also linked to the ancient kingdom of Urartu, meaning, while the exact etymology is debated, some interpretations suggest it means sacred land, holy land, or high land. Certain interpretations suggest that the name could also signify the curse is reversed, according to some religious sources referencing the end of the flood and God's covenant with Noah. And the location of the mountains of Ararat are typically associated with the mountains in the Armenian highlands, with Mount Ararat being the most prominent peak. Now that I have given you the general knowledge of the name Ararat according to the general consensus, I must point out that although Mount Ararat itself sits within the borders of Turkey, its historical ties to the ancient past lay with the Armenian people. This Mount Ararat of ancient Urartu is widely considered today by mainstream Bible scholars as being the region, and even the mountain, where the Ark of God went to rest. But what do others around the world have to say about this ancient biblical name that is a vital piece of the puzzle to solve the mystery of where to find Noah? The Assyrian text. In addition to the reference to Mount Ararat in the Bible, Assyrian texts similarly state that the meaning of Mount Ararat comes from the Assyrian name for the state of Urartu, which was located at the foot of the mountain from the 6th to 9th centuries BC. The Babylonian legend. There is a Babylonian story which ties Mount Ararat with Armenia, which has long regarded the mountain as a national symbol. According to legend, the Armenian king Ara rejected the love of the Babylonian queen Semiramis. The enraged queen sent her army against the king, and during the battle, Ara was mortally wounded. He was taken to the queen and died in her palace. The queen decided to bury the body of the king at the foot of a mountain, and that picturesque peak began to be called Ararat soon thereafter. We have stories and legends of a single mountain named Ararat that is molded into a narrative that links the biblical story of the Great Flood and the resting place of the Ark to the region of modern-day Turkey. But many seem to miss the obvious description of what the prophet Moses pointed out in the Book of Genesis and Jubilees. While these stories and legends link a single mountain named Ararat within the borders of Turkey and the ancient kingdom of Urartu, they fail to recognize that Moses described Ararat as being a range of mountains and never a single mountain. This is our first biblical testimony that disqualifies a single mountain being called Ararat, therefore disproving Mount Ararat of modern-day Turkey as the resting grounds of Noah's Ark. By searching on, we find in the Abarim publications of the Hebrew language important facts and views about the ancient name Ararat. For instance, it states the meaning to be unclear, along with its etymology to also be unclear. It goes on to say, the name Ararat in the Bible is the name of a mountain range, not a single mountain, which is famous for being the site of the first shipwreck in history. The stranding of the Ark of Noah, Genesis 8:4. Nowadays nobody knows for sure where the Ararat might be, but in the days of Hezekiah, people still did, as the assassins of King Sennacherib of Assyria were reported to have fled there. 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 37. As for the etymology of the name Ararat, it states that the word Ararat is probably imported from a foreign language and it doesn't really mean anything in Hebrew. But according to Jones's Dictionary of Old Testament Proper Names, the name Ararat comes from 1. The common Hebrew word ha'ar, hill, mountain, and 2. The Hebrew verb yarad, to go down, descend, march down. Jones's Dictionary of Old Testament Proper Names reads mountain of descent, which is a wonderful interpretation if it didn't ignore the final teth sound. The following cluster of words seems more appropriate. Arar, to curse, rtt, retet, trembling, panic, and rth, rata, ring out. To conclude, the meaning of the name Ararat is the case with many names from the earliest chapters of Genesis. It's impossible to retrieve the intended meaning of the name Ararat. We can't even be sure in which language this name originated, but the way this name was later spelled, it seems to stylize the Noah story. A curse and a trembling, then a mountain and a future in a flash laid out. Abarim Publications. Let us now look at the two etymologies and the overall view of Abarim Publications. While the name Urartu is of Assyrian origin from the ancient name Uruatri, and the Assyrian text claiming that the name Ararat originates from these two ancient names for a single mountain in the state of the ancient kingdom of Urartu, the kingdom of Urartu itself did not come into existence until the 9th century BC. Therefore, the name Ararat, coming out of the ancient kingdom of Urartu, cannot be applied to the Ararat mountains of the Bible for two very simple reasons. 1. The kingdom of Urartu began about 2,000 years after the flood, along with the Assyrian Empire that gave the name Urartu to the region. So we must take note that the name Urartu, Uruatri, or Urashtu are foreign words to the ancient Hebrew, as they could only have originated after the time of the Tower of Babel. 2. The timeline of the formation of Mount Ararat in Turkey is considered by geologists to have happened about 3,000 years ago. This is further proven due to thousands of feet of sediment with sea fossils in the region of Ararat, Turkey, meaning only one thing: the Ararat mountain of Turkey was not there at the time of the flood. However, this timeline does link the formation of Mount Ararat to the ancient kingdom of Urartu at about the same time, being about 3 millennia ago. Therefore, at the very least, allowing the Assyrian text credibility of how Mount Ararat of Turkey may have got its name, but proves without doubt that it is not the Ararat mountains of the Bible written in Genesis chapter 8:4. As for the Babylonian legend, well, because it is said to have happened during the 9th century BC, and being that Ara, whether a king, a hero, or just a mere man, the story has no historical evidence to prove that the name Ara is the reason for the name Ararat of ancient Urartu. However, a great tale, it has no biblical connection. Finally, we have the Abarim Publications, that by far has the most qualified explanation, with some very interesting points that demand questions if we are going to trace the origins to this vital ancient name of the Bible, the name Ararat. It states that the meaning of Ararat is unclear. It states that the etymology is also unclear. It states that nobody knows where the Ararat mountains might be. It states, in the days of the Assyrian Empire, people still knew where the Ararat mountains were, and that knowledge has disappeared with time. It then concludes that it is impossible to retrieve the intended meaning of the name Ararat. They go on to say that they do not know to which language this word Ararat originated from. And most significantly, they say the name Ararat is probably a foreign word and does not really mean anything in Hebrew, unless you were to apply the most favorable words from the Hebrew dictionary that best fits the narrative during the time of the flood. Ara, to curse, rtt, retet, trembling, panic, and rth, rata, ring out. If this is the best source of meaning to the ancient word Ararat from the biblical flood, it begs the question, did the angel of presence give Moses the name Ararat to write down on Mount Sinai? Or does the name Ararat originate from the lips of Noah himself during the time the ark rested on one of its mountains? Were the mountains a curse? Did the mountains tremble in all the chaos of the flood? Or did the name Ararat originate from what Noah saw after escaping the greatest cataclysmic event that ever occurred on the face of the earth? What did Noah see on the mountain? What did Noah feel? And what did Noah say to express himself on one of the mountains where the ark rested? Was Noah in awe because he saw the beginning of the way to the promise of the Almighty Creator? From the land of creation to the Mount of the East, to the home of the ark. Was Noah describing what he felt and what he saw in the name he gave the ancient mountain range? Does the ancient name of this mountain range tell a glimpse of the biblical story? Because if the name Ararat is of the ancient Hebrew tongue spoken by Noah and his descendants prior to the Tower of Babel, then to trace its origins would most certainly take us back to where it all began, the land of creation speaking the tongue of creation. Join me in part 2 of Finding Noah, the ocean warrior from the days of old and the land of creation.